Mark is the earliest gospel representation that we have of the stories of Jesus. And it was probably Peter that was telling Mark, what he saw with his own eyes. And so a lot of people will say that Mark is an eyewitness account from Peter being told to Mark, who's writing it down.
Like if you could know the will of God, would you even want to do it? Or would you say, well, that depends. Does it align with what I want to do or not? Well, you don't want the will of God. You don't want the will of God if your first question is, does it align with what I want or not?
There were always those that were sick or had a family member that was sick or wanted to be forgiven of sin. And it always talks about them following Jesus and waiting for a moment to ask him for this. And the Gospel of Mark tells us that's the good soil.
But here's what's remarkable about the story of this man. He didn't sit through 10 years of church services and finally have a transformation. It happened in a moment. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with sitting in church, but this man experienced more in a minute with God than you and I could experience in 60 years in just sitting in church if we miss Jesus while we sit in church.
If you are a follower of Jesus, you have authority in this life. Well, what do I have authority over? Do you have kids? You have authority to raise them in faith. You have authority to build them up as disciples.
In every area of life, if we would start to be the kind of neighbors and husbands and sons and daughters, the kind of employees, the kind of citizens that Jesus is like, this is what it means to follow me with all of your heart, our world would look radically different. In his sovereign hands, our choices become better. In his hands, in his sovereign hands, we can get wisdom even in the confusing times of life. In his hands, we can have peace even in moments of despair. In his hands, we can have hope even when it feels like our world is shaken beyond repair. The older I get, the older we get, the less dependent we get. We think success or we think experience is supposed to make us independent, but what the scripture says again and again is we're created for dependence. To say, God, we need you. God, we're lost without you.
Has your heart been robbed from the joy of the Lord this week? Has your faith been hijacked by distractions this week? Has sin crept in and taken up residence? Where today do you need Jesus to come in and say, hey, I can flip your heart and I can make room for something else?
Sometimes he's going to speak a word of encouragement to me, right? And I want to be so encouraged as I receive his love. And sometimes he's going to speak a correction to me. And he's going to say, as a loving father, I want to use my word to correct an attitude in your life or a habit or whatever. I want to correct that. God has a plan for all of us, not just a select few, all of us to live with purpose. And nothing in your life needs to change on Monday morning before you can start to discover a new purpose that God will give you. And so if there's ever this moment of wondering, what exactly is Good Friday about? What exactly is the cross all about? It is about the work that God does through his son, Jesus Christ, on our behalf to bring us back to God. We've been going through Mark for 16 weeks. Jesus has said, I'm going to die, I'm going to be buried, I'm going to raise. Jesus says, if you want to be my disciple, deny yourself, take up your cross, follow me. Jesus goes to a cross. He dies a painful death. He's resurrected victoriously. And the end of the story is the ladies leave bewildered and afraid. And I'm like, isn't that that's what we're like as humans, right?